Ah, hello everyone. So yesterday we talked all about different stressors, different things that can cause us stress. And so today what we're going to learn about is how our body responds to it, both physically and mentally or psychologically. And so we're going to start with the physiological response to stress. And one system in our body that we've talked about before, which is our endocrine system. And our endocrine system is our body's kind of hormonal response. It's the chemical response. And so the way that our body responds physiologically is secreting things like adrenaline to give us kind of this boost of energy when we're feeling stressed out, which is why, you feel your heart rate increasing, your pupils will dilate, your hands will get sweaty. And the thing to know about this, because we've talked about the endocrine system before, is what starts your response to stress. And while the endocrine system is kind of its own thing, it all starts with the hypothalamus. And so the hypothalamus then sends a signal to the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary gland sends it to different hormones that secrete different things. The hypothalamus is the important thing to remember for the sake of this class. Now, I talked just briefly about how when our body is responding and our endocrine system is kicking into gear, it'll, secrete adrenaline and you feel your heart rate pounding and things like that. This also relates to something that's known as the General Adaptation Syndrome, or just GAS. And this is also kind of the three-step system in how your body is responding. And so the first step is that fight or flight response. It is the alarm. And so this is when your body is realizing that there is some sort of stressor, whether it's a hassle, frustration, all the stuff that we learned about yesterday. Your body notices it and gets itself ready. It's that fight or flight. Are you going to run from it, or are you going to fight it, in a sense? Then we get to the second stage, which is the resistance. This is when your body is fighting that stress. You're working super, super hard. You're trying to do it all. But no matter what, eventually it gets to the last stage, which is exhaustion. Like, you can only fight against a stressor for so long. You only have so many chemicals. Your body only has so much energy. Eventually you reach exhaustion. And so that is kind of the three system in the General Adaptation Syndrome. So now we're going to get into the psychological response. And when we kind of look at what happens with the stressor, you have a stressor, and then that stressor can result in various negative effects of stress. You can see some examples here. But in between that, where you have the stressor and the outcome, something that can help to have a more positive outcome is what we call moderators. And so there's all sorts of different moderators of stress, which are psychological, that can help us to not necessarily get less stressed, but to have less negative outcomes as a result of that stress. And so some of these things include having social support, so reaching out to someone and someone being there, to help you out, to talk you through these things so you're not going through a stressful event alone. Another one is self-efficacy, knowing that, you got this, you can do it. There's also the perception of control. A lot of times people feel more stressed out, and when I asked you guys in the journal entry a couple days back, what causes stress, a lot of people had stuff that related to a sense of control. And so feeling as though we have some control over what's stressing us out helps to moderate that stress. We also have something known as psychological hardiness, which I'm about to talk about in more detail, so I can skip it for now. And then optimism. So just having this perception of, kind of seeing the better side of it. That even if you're in a stressful situation, it's an obstacle that you can overcome. That, yes, it's stressful, but you're going to learn from this. You're going to overcome it and become a stronger person because of it. Having that sort of mindset helps to moderate stress. Now, I skipped over psychological hardiness because we're actually going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Because when we look at this idea of psychological hardiness, there's kind of three main parts, and it's known as kind of the 3 C's. The first one is commitment. So you are committed to what you are doing. You are committed to overcoming it. You're not just kind of doing a little bit and then giving up sort of thing. Like, you are fully committed. That's psychological hardiness. Whatever task you're doing, you're going to see it through to the end. We then have openness to change. This is the idea that, yes, sometimes we are in control. When we can be in control, that's wonderful, but we're willing to kind of let go of some of that control and try new things, not to just do the same thing our entire life. When we find that people that are more open to change have less negative outcomes associated with stress. And then the last one is an internal locus of control. And this is very similar to what I talked about before. Again, it's this perception that we are the ones in control. And even in a situation where we don't have control, we chose to be in that situation of no control. So there's still some control. But a lot of these things have to do with perception, which I come back and talk about all the time. How you view a situation in every way, shape, and form makes all the difference. Now, because I don't want this video to be too long, the last thing I want to talk about is actually the last thing I talked about in the previous video, which is this idea of acculturative stress. So it's when you are seeing a culture for the first time that's different from your culture, and you have to adjust, you have to change. And there's different ways that we moderate acculturative stress as well. Being proficient in the language is huge, because then you can read the signs around you, you can communicate with people, you understand what's going on, even if it's not the culture you grew up in, you still understand it. So being proficient in the language is important. Having economic opportunities in this new culture can help to moderate stress, because a lot of times when individuals come to a new culture, they don't have a job yet, they don't have something that they can do yet, and that just adds to the stress. Having a social network, of course. Having people that are there to support you when you're in this new environment. Maintaining your ethnic identity is also huge. Even if you're going to a new culture, it does not mean that you have to abandon your own culture. And we find that people that hold on to that culture while adjusting to the new culture is the best way of moderating that stress. And then the last thing, which is more of a misconception, is having lots of life experiences in this new culture. A lot of times what individuals will do is they'll just try to avoid the new culture. They'll stay at home, the bare minimum. They'll try not to go out that much and interact. That doesn't help with acculturative stress, because then you're not getting those experiences and kind of learning and adapting. So having lots of life experiences in the new culture also helps to moderate stress. But that is it. Those are kind of the different ways that we respond to stress, both physiologically and psychologically, and then just a little bit about how we moderate stress for acculturation.